So with that, I would love to turn it over to Alexis Kahn, who is going to be talking with you today. She is from our business banking team and is very well versed in what you should typically expect from any bank for your business banking needs.
Great, thanks, Miria, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. You know, it's certainly Zoom is not preferable. We'd like to be in person, but this is a great alternative and certainly allows you to be eating some lunch and doing, you know, not having to drive anywhere. So Zoom has really saved the day for a lot of us. I want to start. Can everybody hear me okay? Is the audio in a good level and everything? Okay, great, perfect. So as Miria referenced, I am from the cash management sales team of Chelsea Groton Bank. Basically what that means is that I'm responsible for assisting our business customers open business accounts and anything having to do with any of their account related needs, as well as all of our cash management services. So I will touch upon a little bit what that means because especially new business owners, when I say cash management, their eyes kind of glaze over. So that, you know, it doesn't, it's not necessarily so intuitive what that means. So I'll explain that a little bit. But I, just for disclaimer, sit on the part of the bank where it's taking in our customers' funds and allowing them to utilize them for payments and taking in their customer payments and that kind of thing. But I'm not on the lending side. So I think in other seminars as part of this series, you'll be introduced to some of the folks on our commercial lending team. So I just wanted to provide that as a disclaimer because I'm not responsible at all for any kind of business loans. That's a different team that handles those. I mean, certainly we work very closely because from a relationship management standpoint, you really want to have a great relationship with your kind of daily banker for your normal operating account, but also, you know, if you're kind of foreseeing that you'll need some funding in the sense of a loan, having a relationship with the commercial lender as well. But I just wanted to start that off because I get a lot of loan questions because obviously people certainly, you know, want to fund their businesses through loans. And I always say, oh, that's actually not me. So if it's okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen. There's a presentation. If you don't mind, I'm going to not, you know, go bullet by bullet. I think it's kind of boring. And B, so if I kind of jump around a little bit, I'll just reference that I already covered something on a previous slide, but I'm not going to just, you know, read off the slide. So bear with me. I'm using it as a basis of some content, but I'm not going to stick to the slides. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see it okay? Okay, perfect. So again, without going bullet by bullet, what I just wanted to mention is that, you know, to kind of cover the topics that we're looking to achieve for today's session, it's really about kind of understanding what business accounts are, why you would want them as opposed to a personal account, you know, what the real rationale is for having a business relationship with a bank rather than just kind of running through things through your personal account, and kind of what the services are that are out there. I mean, when I'm working with small businesses or new businesses, a lot of them don't realize that there's this whole breadth of services that the bank provides to commercial customers. And without knowing that they exist, you might be encountering something during your expansion and your growth trajectory that is like a sticking point. It's frustrating to you. It's taking you a lot of time from a banking perspective, and you're not aware of the fact that the bank might have a solution for that. So while it might not be relevant for you right now, and it might seem so long-term that you'll need it, it's helpful to just kind of know at the back of your head that this exists, because when you do get to that point, you want to know that it exists. So, you know, that's one of the things that we'll cover. And certainly, you know, I'll go into a little bit about improving your chances of getting a loan, but as I mentioned, I'm, you know, not in the position to really talk with a great level of expertise on the lending side. So yeah, I, you know, as I mentioned, just went through those sort of what all the options are for you on the business account level, so that you really have a full perspective of what you can do with a business banking account. What I like to say is, on a fundamental basis, people kind of, get a little bit caught up sometimes with, oh my gosh, how does a business money market account work? It sounds sort of scary unless you're familiar, unless you've had a business bank account in the past, or how does a business operating account work? Because it really fundamentally, a business checking account and a business money market or savings account really fundamentally operate very similarly to a personal account. So the basic transactions are very similar. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's just a matter of how the accounts are structured that it's important to kind of decipher and determine when you're looking to open a business account, as well as, as I mentioned, the suite of services that are available eventually for you. But, it's not more complicated than how are you taking in your payments from your customers. So whether that's a check or whether it's either paying you directly electronically into the account, whether you're collecting a credit card for payment, those kind of things, are all pretty straightforward. And then how you're paying your bills, are you sending a check to somebody? Are you using a bill pay, which is similar to how you have a bill pay on a personal account? Are you sending an electronic payment to them? Are you sending them a wire transfer? It's really it's an apples to apples comparison from a certain extent. So thank you for launching that poll, Maria. So it looks like all of you have not started a business yet. So that's great. That's helpful information. And actually, what I was going to encourage you to do, if possible, if you could put into the chat what your business type is in just a couple of words, in terms of the industry that you're working in, not your whole elevator pitch, but just sort of for me to get a sense of what your business is. That can help. I will try to incorporate your business in terms of examples that I'm using throughout the presentation. So, and then the other thing I would say is, certainly if there's something in particular that you want to make sure that is covered through this, where it's your burning question that you want to make sure that, this is what I really, really need to know about business banking, I'll make sure that I cover that within the course of this conversation, just so I'm really happy. I see one comment, which is farming agricultural, beginning with apiary honey. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then Steph, you said recreational fitness gym. Okay, perfect. Thank you for those, that insight, and certainly be kind of what you want to get out of this class. You can, if there's things that come up, just enter them into the chat. You can always unmute yourself and interrupt me. I don't care at all. But, if you're kind of in a groove and just want to enter it into the chat, that's fine too. And I'll make sure I periodically keep at that. And then, Mary, did you have were there any other polls before I go into it, or, okay. So based on the fact that you haven't started your business yet, I think it's safe to assume that you haven't established a business account at this juncture too. Is that correct? That's safe to assume, because if you don't have a business, you haven't probably opened an account. So if it's okay, what I'll do is start by, here we go. Here's just like the different business account types that they're wanting to touch upon. I'm actually, as I said, going to go a little bit out of order here, because what I want to first kind of get out in the open is, why would you even decide to establish a business account? Why is it necessary when you could just run things through a personal account, whether it's your same personal account that you already have, and you just decide, oh, I'm going to do this on the side. I'm just going to, deposit these checks right into my personal account. I'm going to pay checks out of my personal account. And what's the problem with that? Or even if you're establishing a separate personal account, why is it necessary to establish it as a business account rather than a personal account? So basically, to address the first question, really it gets down to several things, one of which is ease of deciphering what is a business expense. Because when you're filing for your taxes for the business, you're going to need to break out everything to either, if you're doing your taxes on your own or if you're giving them to an accountant, you are going to need to go through. And if you think about going through a year's worth of bank statements for your personal side and picking out, oh shoot, did I make that purchase for the business? Was I buying hives with that, from this supplier, or was I buying, from that same supplier something for just, for fun? And to try to rationalize that at the end of the year, if you can imagine, is a huge headache. So having everything separated, you can just know that absolutely everything that is an expense in that business account at the end of the year can be put forth as a business expense for the sake of, offsetting your tax burden and being able to report your income from, during tax time. So it's just automatically so much easier. The other thing is that this is something that might not occur to you, but just from the legitimacy of your business, if you have your you're sending a check to a supplier, let's say for you're buying a bunch of hives or buying a bunch of bees. I don't really know how you go about that, but essentially, like if you're paying somebody, and let's say you cut them a check, from your personal account, maybe they're not going to be taking you as seriously, as a kind of legitimate business who's really entering this, both feet in. If the check says, your name instead of a business name, they think, is this being done as a hobby? Is it being done as a legitimate business? So they might maybe not fulfill your order as quickly because they're going to prioritize their actual, what they know of their bona fide business customers. So it's even just like a matter of optics in some cases, where you'd want the check or you'd want the payment to be coming from the business name rather than from, you as a person. The other thing is, this is going a little bit back to the business expense part of it for tax purposes, but from the IRS's standpoint, only businesses can deduct business expenses. So if there's any confusion as to whether that was a hobby expense because it's not coming from, through a traditional business account, there's a possibility that the IRS will deem that that's a hobby and not a business expense, and then you can't deduct it. So, even just another rationale is, given the time that it would take you to parse out, this is a business expense and this is a personal expense through your bank account, you can most likely, even if you're doing, let's say, quarterly income statements and balance sheet, like for accounting purposes, again, not on the tax side, but just for kind of to get your own snapshot of how the business is doing, think about how much longer it's going to take to do something like that on financial reporting if you're going to have to go through and say, oh, is this a business expense or a personal expense, versus if you just pull it all in from a business account, you could have the financial statements done so much quicker. Your accountant will love you so much more, and you'll have an audit trail because you have everything documented within that's coming in and out of that designated business account. So that's kind of just like getting that out there because a lot of people think, oh my gosh, it would just be so much easier to run this through my personal account. And while it might seem very enticing, it's not a good idea in the long run. So then the other thing I just wanted to mention, because I don't think this presentation really goes into it, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because you're not yet established. I think, and Miriam will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you already had discussion about different entity structure types. Is that correct, Miriam? Not yet. Okay.
No,
so you'll have that in
the second class. The first one was, are you ready?
Oh, okay.
And you're next.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So I guess I should say, I'm sorry for my confusion, but I guess I should say you will learn more about this in a subsequent class, so I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but I wanted to mention that what you need in order to establish a business account. Let's say you're like, okay, I'm ready to go on my business. I have determined what kind of entity type I'm going to register as. What do I need to bring to the bank in order to open this account? Because you certainly want to be prepared kind of for success so that you can go in and you're not having to then scramble to collect a bunch of stuff when you're ready to open a bank account as the business. So essentially, if you register as a DBA, which is just like basically you put a shingle up and you say, I am Alexis Khan doing business as XYZ LLC. XYZ, not LLC, just XYZ. So I am XYZ business and I just have a shingle up as XYZ business. I will only need, in order to register a bank account and open a bank account at a business, as a business, I will just need a trade name certificate. That trade name certificate is obtained from your local town where you're doing business. So I live in North Stonington. I would go to North Stonington Town Hall and I would say, I am Alexis Khan doing business as XYZ business. And they would give me that trade name certificate and I would bring that to the bank and I would be able to open the bank account that way. It depends on whether also you can be a DBA with just using your individual social security number, or you can file for a federal tax ID number. If you had the federal tax ID number, you would also need to bring a letter from the IRS that has that federal tax ID number so that we're reporting based off of your federal tax ID number, not your social security number. So that's really it. You just bring the trade name certificate in. However, if let's say you register as an LLC, you would need, when you register with the state for the LLC, you would, once that registration process is approved, you receive what's called a certificate of organization. You'd bring a certificate of organization to the bank along with, the bank collects your personal information as a signer. So, just the same kind of stuff like a driver's license and your social security number and your date of birth and all of that kind of thing, as if you were to open a regular personal account. But I'm saying above and beyond just that, you would bring a certificate of organization. If you had a partner, it wasn't just a single member business, just you, you would also need to bring a copy of that operating agreement, which is kind of who does what between you and your partner. If you file as a corporation, you would need to bring a copy of the certificate of incorporation. So it's, again, the same thing that the Secretary of State in Connecticut is going to provide you with at the end of the registration process. You bring that in too. So it's a little bit dependent upon your entity type, but what's nice to know is that you're basically not just walking in and saying, okay, I'm me, here's my driver's license, I'm opening a business account. There's documentation from the business itself that you would need to produce in order to then take the next step of opening the business account. Then we come to sort of, the question of what's the right bank for you, and how do you kind of go through the due diligence process of determining what bank is right for you and what bank account is right for you. So I would say from choosing the right bank, usually what I like to recommend, it's definitely a matter of convenience. You want to make sure that however you like to do your banking is, that bank that you're looking at and ultimately selecting can kind of accommodate you in how you like to do your banking. So maybe you're the kind of person who loves to go to the local branch because you have a great relationship with the people and you really like being able to go in and ask questions and have them help you. So you want that face-to-face interaction. Maybe you're somebody who's like, I don't want to have any in-person contact. I want to do everything online. I just want, e-statements. I want online banking and I don't want to have to talk to anybody. So making sure that the online banking platform is, very robust, and making sure that you can do everything that you want via online banking. Things like that. So, for example, one thing that we rolled out during, this is an example of sort of like figuring out what the bank does to help you in whatever channel you want to use. We, during the pandemic, rolled out something called Chelsea Live Video Banking, which is essentially a way for you to, instead of like call a customer service number or speak to a banker over the phone or visiting them in person at a branch, you can do it all through a video banking platform, and you can like e-sign documents that way, all from home. So, you know, whether the bank that you're choosing has the convenient services that are relevant to you. Some people don't want to touch an app, you know, video banking app, or they want that face-to-face interaction. So it doesn't matter if the bank has something like that, as long as they have a branch that's close to you. So it's really a matter of really, like, thinking about what's most important to you and whether the, you know, that bank is able to accommodate you that way. The other thing I always say is when you're comparing banks, you know, to open your business account, there's two things. One, at your juncture of your stage as being a startup, you really, I would say, should be looking for an account that is free. If that bank doesn't offer an account that's free, I would say try to look elsewhere, because, you know, you're at a really early stage of your business. Nobody wants to be paying bank fees for, you know, it makes sense maybe when you're bigger and you're running a lot of money through there, but like you're basic, you just want something that's not going to cost you any money. A lot of times you can kind of read through the fine print to figure out whether the bank, I should say, offers a business account that is free if you meet certain criteria. So, for example, sometimes they'll say it's free checking if you maintain an average balance of X amount. So it's not, there will be a monthly maintenance fee if you don't fulfill these certain criteria. If you think that you will fulfill those certain criteria, let's say it's like, you know, an average balance of $10,000, and you say, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to keep $10,000 all the time in the account, then that's a perfectly reasonable account because it's not going to ultimately cost you anything. But you might say, oh, there's no way that I can be sure that I'm going to consistently do that. Don't enter into that account type, because then you ultimately might get hit with fees, and then, you know, at the end of the day, that account wasn't free for you. So, you know, be realistic about what you think, you know, your ultimate kind of balances and transactions will be in the beginning, in order to, you know, select an account that essentially is free for the time being. What I would also say, I think, you know, what I see a lot with especially new businesses and businesses that are in early stages is they have a tendency to kind of, you know, want to just get the account open. You know, it's checking the box. It's making sure that I have an account, I have some place to collect my, you know, to deposit checks or collect my incoming payments. I checked the box, phew, I'm set up. And maybe it's a bank that you've worked with forever and ever as a your personal banking relationships, so you know everybody really well. And so you have that comfort of, you know, they've been great to work with on the personal side. But what is the limiting factor is, as your business grows, are they in a position where they're going to be able to help you with a broader range of services, of, you know, a cost-effective price structure? Are they able to grow with you, basically? Because there are some banks that are wonderful, wonderful hometown banks that just aren't really business banks. So yeah, they can accommodate opening like a small little account, you know, business account for you. But when you take off and your business is gangbusters, they're like, oh, I can't really help you there. So to kind of think big picture and a little bit longer term of, okay, and this is kind of probably something that would go, you know, hand in hand with your business plan, and maybe think when you're writing your business plan about how does this affect my banking. So, you know, if like in year 5, your expectation, or at least your hope, is going to be that, you know, you're like taking in, you know, this is just a random example, but, you know, you're collecting 100 checks a month or something like that. And you're going to be out and about, you know, running the business. You're going to be out selling honey, or you're going to be really at the forefront of managing the team of fitness instructors, but you're not going to be running any of the banking anymore. So what is the business bank relationship going to enable you to do that's going to, allow you to push all the banking to the side and delegate it to somebody else, that you're not going to be the one who has to go, make deposits at the branch, or, there's other services that are going to be able to accommodate you're not having to make deposits at the branch. So things like that, think a little bit bigger of, are they going to be able to accommodate you long-term based on your business plan? The other thing is, kind of conversely, there are a lot of big banks who have a very great array of different banks, fees and services. But when you get to the point in your business where you're going to need a lot more hand-holding, like my larger commercial customers are the ones that I'm talking to basically weekly, because, there's just so many more intricacies of their relationship that it's not something where it's like you set it and forget it. There's questions that come up, they have signer changes, they need to add in, somebody else to entitle for their account. So there's a lot more changes. Are you going to be able to easily make those changes with somebody who's like your main relationship banker, rather than every single time being on, 1-800 hold forever because you're just talking to a customer service representative? So things like that, it's kind of like that. It's almost like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, whereas, okay, well, are they going to be able to grow with me? But at the same time, are they also able to give me like a point person or somebody local that is going to be able to help me answer my questions? I think we have some questions. Oh, sorry. I see another, working with my son to start an electrical contracting business. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So that's, those are kind of the considerations that I like to kind of advise people, because I do see a lot of times, I think about one business owner in particular that was a very established business owner for one industry type, but then he started a new business as kind of a side thing. He had a partner, and he was starting a new kind of a bar restaurant business as a side thing. And, he opened an account that he wasn't really thinking big picture, and then didn't realize, this is exactly the point I was making about, he didn't realize, because he was in a different industry type, he didn't realize all of the different things that were available to him on a longer term basis. And so he was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that I could do all this stuff, as my business grows, because even though he was such a seasoned professional, he wasn't in that same industry. So it's really helpful to just kind of view it within the lens of your own industry. And that would be a great question that I would ask too when you're meeting with a banker about, potentially exploring a business account at their bank, to see, given your knowledge of my industry, what would you recommend, what do you think are sort of the long-term, obviously when your business account is pretty basic, you're probably not going to subscribe to a bunch of services. But as you grow, what are the long-term things that are efficiencies and convenient services that I would be able to take advantage of that are relevant to my industry, not just relevant to every single business? As I mentioned before, a checking account is really very similar to a person. There's nothing that's more glorious or, more complicated than that. The interesting thing that I will say, though, about a business account versus a personal account is that you can have a lot more of a structure in a business account kind of setting. Personal account, you probably think like have your checking account, maybe have a savings account or something like that, but like that's about the end of it. With businesses, you can have a whole kind of structure of accounts that really segregate your activities. So for example, I have a customer, this is so smart on their part, and we advise this in a lot of cases, where they have I'm wondering actually if I can, see if I can use a function on this. Let me see, hold on one second. I might be trying to get too fancy. I'll keep talking, I don't want to waste time. But basically, they have, oh, here we go. Can you see the whiteboard? Okay. So they have their main operating. My drawing is terrible. I have always been terrible at art, but let's call this their operating account. And sorry, again, please forgive my terrible art, but you'll get the hint. They have, for customers that pay them, let's say they have a large customer that pays them electronically directly into their account. Now, from a fraud perspective or from a account security perspective, you might think, well, I don't want to give out my operating account number because this is where all my money is going to be. So I don't want to hand my customer, here is my, all my bank account information. Just for reference, it's the same thing as giving somebody a check, because honestly, your check has your account number and the routing number of the bank. But as we try to advise our customers to go in the direction of, electronic and the opportunities for fraud in all of the check exchange that goes on, if you have a customer who's willing to pay you electronically directly into your account, I would say, great, that's even better for you than taking a check. But giving out your operating account might not be a very good idea. So instead, I think I can do this better. There we go. That's much better. So instead, you could establish a separate account that would just be your receivables account, and you give out your account number for that separate account. And then when you have, let's say, they transfer into your account, and then you could, in online banking, through a quick transfer feature, you can let's see, transfer at the end of the day or end of the week or something. As funds pile up in this receivables account, you can transfer into your operating account. So you're safeguarding the account number for your receivables account, but keeping everything kind of, segregated or pooling, I should say, in your operating account. Another thing, let's say you get to the point where you're running payroll for a bunch of employees. A lot of people establish again, they give out their payroll account number to their payroll service provider, and then they just fund with a transfer from the operating account to the payroll account. Then call this the payroll account. They're going to fund the payroll account when they need to run payroll, and then the balance is going to go basically down to zero or something small after they run payroll. And another example could be you could establish a payables account instead of the receivables account, and that would essentially work the same way, where, as I mentioned, if you're cutting a bunch of checks out of the account, maybe you don't want that account number floating around at all your suppliers for your main operating account where the bulk of your money is. So you establish a payables account, and then your vendors are only getting, your vendors are only getting your check number, your bank account number for that payables account, that once you transfer the money into the operating account, there's no money in there. So if even someone tried to steal it, there'd be nothing to steal from. So there's great ways with business accounts to structuring so that they make it easier, they make it cleaner, and they also make it more safe from a confidentiality of your account number standpoint. The other thing, what I will mention, and this sort of is referenced in the slides, that these can, if you want, be made all automated. So these connections between your accounts can be set up as sweeps. That's a service that, again, is usually has a fee. I would say when you're kind of way along, far along in your business and it makes sense for you. This process of the receivables being pushed to your operating account instead of transferring it manually within online banking, it would automatically happen at the end of each day. So again, probably not relevant at this juncture of your business, but something to keep in mind when you're at the point where, like, I can't be logging into online banking every day and think about how much I want to transfer. it could just be set it and forget it, and the bank does it for you. Similarly, what you could do is establish, again, in this whole account structure, you could establish a savings account or a money market account that you're putting money aside for, maybe a tax payment or to buy a new piece of equipment or something like that. And you can similarly, make a manual transfer on a certain frequency from your operating account to your savings account, just within online banking. And again, that's just something that could be set up as a sweep as well, but it's a way for you to be able to kind of segregate money on the side so that you're not touching it through your operating account. So there's a lot of different options here, which is great because, that's not something that you would probably even think of, from a personal bank account standpoint, but is much more relevant for businesses. Similarly, what you could do is have this operating account set up with something called a draw from your savings account. You might have something like this similar on your personal account side. And that is so that when if in the event that your operating account went negative, it would pull from your savings automatically so that you wouldn't be charged an NSF fee, like a overdraft fee. So this relationship between operating account and savings account can even be made kind of automatic so that if your account goes negative, you have a buffer through your savings account. So I'm going to go back to the main slides. Some of the other services that I wanted to go into, we went into why to avoid commingling, but the services that I wanted to go into, payroll services are what I referenced when I talked about having a separate payroll account. And payroll services, this might be something that you'd want to talk to your bank about as well. There's payroll providers through ADP, and Paychex are basically the largest ones. So if you've heard of one of those, or if you've ever been paid by your company through one of those services, those are certainly the largest ones. A lot of the CPA firms locally, so depending on where you select as your CPA, like your own accountant for your business, maybe ask them if they offer payroll services. A lot of times they offer a lot more like hand-holding than the bigger providers who are really more, for large corporations. They might not have a great offering for a smaller business. But some banks do offer payroll services in-house as well. It's usually part of like a package of other things. So they never, as far as I know, other banks don't necessarily have payroll service in-house, like their own people are doing it. If they have a partnership with a vendor that offers it on their behalf, but it's part of like their package of services. So that's a question to ask, or a question to ask your CPA if they either do it or have recommendations for payroll services. Because it's not something that I would recommend for a small business for you to do it yourself. The calculations get really complicated in terms of what you have to pay in state payroll taxes, and how you're doing deductions for everything. So I would say at your juncture of your business, it's probably better to outsource that to somebody else. So then this is where we talk about, the kind of what are the cash management services, which may not be relevant to you now, but may be something that you want to keep in mind for when you get bigger. And I see there's a chat. That's a very good question. So Chelsea Groton doesn't offer payroll services right now. It's actually something that we're looking into. We typically refer out to our CPAs that we work very closely with and have great relationships with. And so we think that they're really excel at that area. So you could always contact me offline and I can give you some recommendations of CPAs that do offer payroll services, but we don't at this point. But, certainly if you check back with us in, a couple of months, it might be different. So in terms of cash management services, we talked about the sweeps that I referenced, automating those transfers. Basically, the ones that I would say are relevant to just kind of touch upon are something called ACH origination. And basically, when I was referencing electronic transfers, that's what ACH origination is. So ACH origination allows you to either push electronically a payment out to any account in the United States, business or personal, or to debit somebody else's account, with their permission, with their authorization, either a business or personal account as well. So it goes both ways. And it basically, if you think about it, you might have on your personal account currently the ability to, do like a bank-to-bank transfer, or to pay somebody some bank, personal bank account through something called Zelle. If those are familiar to you, that's sort of the equivalent, but on the consumer checking side. On the business side, it's a whole service. It's something that, you could, it's very interesting and allows you to do a lot of different things, but like you could replace all of your check writing with ACH origination, because you basically have the ability to push that payment directly into their bank account without them needing to cash a check. So it's a really versatile system, but it is a cash management service. So it is something that, it has fees associated with it. It's not, kind of a free checking service, at least, on the commercial level, what we're offering at Chelsea Groton. So it's something that I really advise for my business customers as they're growing, because it makes it so much more efficient and cost effective when you think about mailing a bunch of checks and all that postage and everything like that. I mean, if you're mailing 2 checks a month, it doesn't make sense. But if you're mailing a lot of checks, think about how much more efficient it is to just log into online banking, change a couple numbers and then just push it out, and then that they have the funds directly in their account. It also speeds up the cash flow cycle, because if you think you order something and you have to wait until not even the cash flow cycle, but the order cycle, they're waiting until they receive and deposit that check and the funds are available, and then they ship your item or then they deliver your item, you could be waiting for something that's really critical. Let's say it's gym equipment. If you're waiting to get the gym equipment until they cash the check and they know that the funds are good, and you have customers coming in who are going to start using that treadmill tomorrow, you have a problem. So ACH allows you to push it right in. It's there within usually 2 days, and then you guarantee that it's there. You're not wondering, did they cash it yet? For account reconciliation, why is this check still outstanding? Because I don't see that it's being debited from my account. It's a lot easier to track, but it is a service, as I mentioned, so it might not be relevant in the very beginning. Another service is called remote deposit capture. It basically allows you to deposit all of your checks directly from your desktop computer through a scanner that we give you. Again, that's really only relevant if you're a very check heavy business. If you don't really deal much with check deposits, it's not relevant for you. For small check deposits, we have mobile check deposit for business. So, the remote deposit capture would not be relevant for you. It would really be just taking a picture, just like you do with a personal account, taking a picture with your of the check with your phone. Lockbox service, we talk about this really less and less. It's a lot more for municipalities and businesses that deal with a ton of checks. I'm not even talking like 100 a month. I'm talking about 500 to 1,000. So it's not as relevant, especially in today's day and age with less checks. But it's helpful to know that if you're a really check heavy business, eventually, let's say your fitness business really takes off, and all of your members are paying by check for some reason, you might say like, okay, I have 1,000 members and they're all paying by check. Lockbox might make sense, but it's more few and far between now. Positive pay. This is one I love to talk about, because even if you don't enroll for the positive pay service, it's sort of good to know about what's out there. Positive pay is a check and ACH fraud detection service. And so I won't go into the details, but basically it's safeguarding your account through the service so that you can know that no one's, stealing your checks and on an unauthorized basis, all of a sudden like creating a fake check that's coming out of your account, or debiting your account electronically and you didn't authorize them to do that. The reason I mention it is because, at this stage, it's probably going to be, again, cost prohibitive for you to sign up from day one. I want positive pay, again, keep it free, keep it simple at this juncture when you're just new. But businesses, what they oftentimes don't know, and I've had multi-million-dollar businesses that don't know of this rule. A personal account under regulations, has 60 days in which to detect fraud. So if you on your personal account see, 45 days in on your statement, oh, that does not, I don't recognize that transaction. Who's this? You could bring it to the bank and say, this is not mine. They do all the fraud, kind of investigation, but they have to get your funds back basically by regulation. Business accounts, because I guess it's perceived that you're more experienced and you're kind of tracking this stuff more regularly, you only have, don't have the same protections. You only have 24 hours in which to detect fraud and have the bank make you whole. Now, granted, you have a relationship with your bank, or community bank, we're going to go to bat and try to get your money back, but by law, we're not required to give you your money back. And so in this case, it makes it so much more important on the business account side to really track everything that's going through your business account. So, Positive Pay would be a perfect solution for that. However, this probably doesn't make sense at this juncture given the cost. So what I would recommend, when you're smaller, is to check your, sign up for mobile banking so that you're being able to, on your phone, when you're waiting in line at the grocery store, just pull up your account and scroll through your activity. Or utilize an alert system. So you can establish a bunch of different alerts and different criteria for any time, you kind of determine like, all right, what's a large transaction size for me? So like, if I lost more than $100, because of fraud, like, would I be really in a bad position? If that's the case, I would set up an alert where any transaction over $100 gets flagged, and I get an alert through the bank account. That it could be a text message, it could be an email, however you set it up, so that you're alerted to the fact that that came out of your account. And then you're immediate, it's quick, and therefore you're within that 24-hour period to report it if it's something that's not yours. You could also set it up that every transaction that clears the account gives you an alert. But some people are like, I had 30 transactions today. I don't really care if they're $2 each, but if it's $100, it matters to me. So that's just kind of a public service announcement to, if you're not under the same rules as a personal account where there's a lot more leniency. Okay, so moving on, that's kind of a little bit of an introduction. I will also say another service that, I think it's covered a little bit further, but I want to make sure to mention it because a lot of people, it's so relevant in today's day and age, is merchant services. And so that a lot of times to new businesses doesn't really know. They're like, what is that? What is that? Basically, it's another layer of something you have to sign up for with a provider that allows you to process credit card payments. So in various different ways, allow you to collect credit card payments from your phone, like one of those little things that plugs into your phone and swipes that way. It could be a whole terminal like you see. Sometimes like somebody goes to the machine and puts it in and then, processes your credit card. It could be online if you're collecting online orders. It could be directly through your website that they're able to pay right directly from your website. So all of those are under the umbrella of merchant services. So for example, similar to your question about payroll services, Chelsea Groton doesn't have merchant services for like people in-house, but we have a partner called Heartland, which is they're like a national, company. They're very, very like large and well regarded, that they do all of that merchant services for you. So that is a whole separate process of, I guess my point is, when you sign up for a bank, you have the ability to go to, unless somehow the bank is like making you package your deal, you theoretically have the ability to go establish your bank account here, but then establish a totally separate merchant services provider. So that would be a piece of advice that I would offer, is don't sort of assume that like, all right, I'm stuck with whoever my bank's merchant services provider is, because you really should shop around not only for the bank account, but also the merchant services provider, because you should be able to get that separately. So you're really getting the best deal all around. So certainly I'm going to sit here and say Heartland is amazing and I would recommend them, But you might go out to 3 different merchant services providers and say, actually, like Square is a very household name, like that's an example of one. And you might say, actually, for my business, this one is less expensive. And you don't have to go with the one that's your bank, that is your own bank's merchant services provider. But I will say, I would definitely recommend looking into it, especially before you really develop your website too much. If you're going to be collecting credit card payments on your website, a lot of them need to be embedded into your website kind of early on. So you don't want to get through the whole process of developing your website and then sometimes say like, oh, actually now I need to put merchant services in here, because it might not jive based on the merchant services provider that you choose. You want to kind of explore that early on before your website is totally developed. But there's basically very few businesses nowadays, as you know, that won't accept credit card, especially when I think about with COVID, there's been a lot of businesses who have said, I don't want to touch cash because of the whole exchange of, another like way to pick up germs. So a lot of them are just only allowing you to pay with credit cards. So if you're one of those businesses, if nobody's carrying around cash, because all these businesses have said in COVID, we're not collecting cash, and you're the only one who does collect cash and no cards, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. So that's a recommendation. This next slide, as I mentioned, we kind of touched upon it, savings account, CDs, it's basically the same as a personal account. There's not very much of a difference. It's just for business instead of a personal account. So I won't go into much detail here. We already talked about that. The deposit insurance I wanted to touch upon, because essentially all you need to know is that just like FDIC insurance on a personal account, you have that for a business as well. So your business, under that EIN number, has $250,000 of FDIC insurance. So basically, as long as you are under $250,000 in deposits, you're totally covered under your bank for that business account. I would say, some people have, let's say, several different entities with several different tax ID numbers, and it's $250,000 up to that, up to $250,000 for each of those entities, even though it's under me and I own all of them. It's based on tax ID number. So that's good to know. The other thing I just kind of wanted to mention on the business card side. So we talked about merchant services, which is you collecting your customers' credit card payments. But how are you going to, use cards basically in buying things or paying for things through your vendors? And we offer business debit cards, and certainly I would advise everybody to get a business debit card for, drawing out some money, paying for certain transactions. It's a great resource. I would say it also makes sense to the extent possible to apply for a business credit card. There's several different reasons. I mean, if you have larger transactions that you need to, let's say you need to buy something that's like thousands and thousands of dollars, it's safer to use a business credit card because, again, your business debit card is directly tied to your bank account versus a business credit card. If there's fraud, there's different mechanisms by which to basically dispute that. So it's always a little safer to have that kind of separate, removal of a link directly to your bank account by having a business credit card. So I would say, some business credit cards are not really into a startup. They might want to see a little bit more experience and kind of your revenue history before they offer a business credit card. But if you can find one, especially ones with like, there's a lot of cards out there that offer great introductory rates where it's 0% for 6 months. So that gives you like a buffer of being able to build up your business before you're starting to make, interest payments on those purchases. Again, you have to kind of balance it with like how you know that you use credit. So if you're somebody who is like, oh, I have a card, I'm just going to run it up, then maybe it's not the best bet. But I do like to kind of, recommend it if possible because having your only source of being able to use like a card for purchases let's say you're buying something online for the business and you're putting in your business debit card. I get a little bit more nervous if somebody like, hacked that site and pulled your card information. It's directly, linked to your business account, which makes me a little more nervous.
Can I
So I
just
think,
Alexis, about the business credit cards, is that I used to work for a company and everything that we did went on our business credit card, because it was very easy for the bookkeeper at the end of the month to sort the business charges into the different categories that it went to, and then just pay off the credit card at the end of the month. And then everything, all the expenses were in one place, because we got a statement from the, not that you don't get a statement from the bank, but it's, it was easier to then like reconcile things and, just make sure that at the end of the day, plus some businesses get rewards, so you get cash back dollars and things like that for using your credit card. So it made some more sense for us to do that.
No, thank you, Maria. That's great. And I see businesses do that a lot, so that's great insight. Again, just talking about fraud, some other things we talked about, like the, alerts and things like that. But these are just general things that I would say for any, you should keep in mind for any banking that you're doing, not just business banking, but, use strong passwords and make sure you have antivirus software and don't, be accessing your bank account from a public wireless hotspot. So one other last thing I'll say from, again, like a, security standpoint, something that's unique to a business account that is not, again, for a personal account, is we have something called entitlements. So you can manage users, meaning let's say at one point you're at the point where, all right, I have an office manager, they're going to do all my banking for, or some banking authorities. Maybe they're going to check the bank account every day to make sure that they're, everything looks okay, or maybe they're doing bank reconciliation. You don't want to give that person, oh, here's my user ID for the business bank account, and here's my password, and it could even be a password that like you use for other things. Now that person has full reign to your business bank account, and if that person ultimately something happens, you sever ties, like they have their free reign of your account. So what a business account allows you to do is establish a separate user where they have their own user ID and password. They're never getting your password, and they can access as much or as little information as you want them to have. So if you only want them to see e-statements, that's all they can do. They can't transfer between accounts. They can't send out payments. They can't do bill pay. They're just using, being able to see e-statements. So that is a huge thing that I would recommend for once you establish the business account, to set it up so that if you're having anybody need access to it, they can do so, through a separate user ID and password. So I know we're at the time, and everything else actually is really related to commercial lending, which I said, I'm not in this position to talk about. So I don't know if there are any questions or anything else that you wanted me to cover that I, in a couple minutes, can address for you.